Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. I really want to go back to reviewing some great runs of comics, but things just keep coming up. I was going to do another video today just about Ethan Van Sciver's Cyberfrog, just because it's something that I think we should all support, just like Jawbreakers, Lost Souls. But something else came up, and I'm going to talk about X-Men Red, their annual and number 5, because sweet merciful heavens, this thing is the embodiment of why Marvel is so bad right now. It just shows you exactly why no one wants to read these stories and why it's just propaganda. And a lot of people have gone over problems with these two books. So I'm not going to go over all of them. I'm going to go over a couple of them. Like, I'm going to skip over the fact that this whole mutant nation thing is silly to begin with. And if you actually take it into consideration, it has cult-like religious symbolism just dripping off of it. But I'm going to leave that be. And the other one is that they're using Poland as an example of intolerance because they want to close their national borders and protect their country and enforce their own laws, which is just a shot across the bow of what all Poland is doing right now. You know, the fact that it has zero terrorist attacks since this large mass migration started going into Europe. The only country in Europe that can claim that. Yeah, but they're the ones that are doing something wrong, right? I'm going to skip over that as much as I would like to talk about Poland. No, I'm going to go right into the heart of something and talk about Jean Grey and the return of Jean Grey and how this whole mutant nation thing is just pure propaganda. And I'm going to start off just with Jean Grey herself, because Jean Grey is just like Hawkeye. I was talking in my last video about how Hawkeye, that they have Clint as Hawkeye that they have in the comics right now, he's not the same character. He looks like the same character, sort of. He has the same name. He's supposedly the same person, but he's really not, because they chopped off all of the history of Hawkeye and just shoved this other character into his skin. They've just done the same thing with Jean Grey. Now, they've brought Jean Grey back to life a number of times, and when they've made her into a different character, at the very least, they had the decency of giving her a different name. She was Madeline Pryor. She was Rachel Summers. Okay, they've done it before. They've done it many times before, but they had the decency to not try and trick you into the fact that this is a different character. Yes, they acknowledged it in some degree, but not with this Jean Grey, no. But she's not the same character. They've cut off all of her backstory. They have taken so many things out of what she is supposed to be from her history and just made her into a new character, but given her the name of Jean Grey and expected you to believe that this is the same Jean Grey. And just to give you an example of that, it's that Jean, as one of the X-Men, she was the one who received the most training from Professor X because they had similar powers. He wanted to teach her how to control her telepathy, and he was the one to do it because his powers were similar to hers. And one of the things that he taught her over and over and over again is you don't violate someone's mind. Okay, you might have to do it in certain circumstances when things get dire, but you just don't do that. And when Professor X himself was forced to do this, he would torture himself afterwards about whether or not he did something wrong and whether he should have done it or not done it. And he tried to pass that on to Jean, and she got that. But no, in this new incarnation of Jean Grey, no, she doesn't care. She violates people's minds left, right, and center. In the annual, there's a guy in Central Park who is bigoted towards mutants. Okay? Now, this is just a regular guy. And what does she do to him? Well, she infiltrates his mind. She picks out his deepest, darkest secret and says, do as I say, or I'm going to tell everyone else what your deepest, darkest secret is. Now, if that's not a form of mind control, it's a form of thought control, is what it is. She's using his own thoughts, which she wasn't allowed to go in there and do that, because if she was the real Jean Grey, if she was the Jean Grey that actually has history in this universe, she would know this. But no, in these pages, now she just seems like It's perfectly fine to enter into this guy's mind and to pick out his deepest, darkest thought and say, I'm going to tell everyone else about it unless you go home and do as I say. This is the Jean Grey that we have today in these pages. And not only that, but right after she does that to this guy, she tells a whole crowd of people, go back to doing what you were doing. And it isn't a suggestion, because the very next panel, you see everybody not just turning around, walking away, being a little confused. No, they're literally doing what they were doing previous to everything starting here. So she just mentally controlled all of these people and shoved those thoughts into their heads to go back to what they were doing. So apparently, that's just perfectly fine according to these Marvel writers. That's something that a character with mind control ability should be able to do, and just be perfectly fine with that. So that is a way that they have cut off the entire history of Jean Grey, and this character is not Jean Grey. Now, I'm going to go over something a little bit that's going to be a little dip in this, but it'll come and circle back to what I've just talked about with Jean Grey. Now, someone might be saying, well, how is this leftist propaganda? How is this not just bad writing? Okay, and I'll tell you a little story about from when I was in university, which was a long time ago. It was in the 90s, so it was a while ago. But we all in the humanities, because I started off with my first degree in history, so I started off in the humanities. And everybody in the humanities, which includes everybody from people in political science and philosophy and history and classics and a whole bunch of other things, a lot of people in the university are in the humanities. In order to have a university, you have to have the humanities. So everybody in the university had to take this course. It was basically Western civilization. Everybody had to be there. So we're talking at least 2,000 people in this auditorium. And the first day, the professor asked the question, how many of you think that people are naturally good? And everybody had to answer, and about 10% of the people said that people were good. And the professor had to say to those 10% of people, no, you're actually wrong, especially according to the way that Western civilizations sees things and has seen things for more than 2,000 years. Okay, people are not essentially good. People, in order to be good, have to work at it, and they have to work at it constantly. So they have to improve themselves, and they have to work at it. So people aren't essentially good. And this comes from the parents of Western civilization, which would be, on the one hand, Judeo-Christian religion, and on the other hand, Greek philosophy. And it's created all of our institutions. It's the basis, it's the basic basis for our laws and the way our governments work and even the way we deal with money, all of these institutions. Okay? It all goes back to that. Now, in the last 500 years, that has been challenged, and intellectually it has kind of grown. But for the normal people, they still understand this, that no, people actually, if left to their own devices, they're not automatically going to turn out good. They need to work at it. You got this leftist idea of the noble savage. The noble savage is a ridiculous idea. It was a myth from the beginning. But no, people on the left think that all you need to do is leave people alone and they'll be fine. They'll work out fine and good. All of these negative things, they all come from society. They don't come from within the person. They come from outside the person. It's all society's fault. So therefore, we got to get rid of all these societal things that destroy a person's internal goodness. Now, like I said, only about 10% of the people, I think it was maybe 10% of the people in that class, argued with that fact when I was in university. I'd hate to see the numbers of what it would be now. But anyways, that's the basis of Western civilization. You believe that, no, people aren't essentially good. They're going to have to work at it. But then we get, and I'm telling you all this because then we get into X-Men Red number 5. And in X-Men Red number 5, what do we have? Again, we have Jean Grey entering into the minds of an entire, well, I think it looks like a platoon of soldiers, certainly a great number of soldiers, without their consent, and putting thoughts into their heads which aren't their own. So she's playing mental games with these people. Again, which is against character, which is against all the things that Professor X has taught her, because believe it or not, whether she thinks it or not, that's mentally controlling them. Okay? And then when she mentally controls all of these people, and then there's another guy just at the end, he said, you have to stop. He resisted this mental control, and then she went on to do the same thing that she did with the guy in Central Park, is she looked into his mind because she knows his name, and she knows his upbringing, and she shames him into turning around. Okay? Again, this is just mental control. Once she's finished mentally controlling them, Nightcrawler says, I don't mean to judge, but did you change something in their minds? And she says, no, I didn't change anything in their minds. No, I just showed them the thoughts and feelings of all the mutants, and then they all chose to do what is right. Really? They chose to do what was right. So you're saying that you didn't alter their free will, you just, without consent, entered into their minds, placed thoughts in their minds which weren't their own, without their consent, and once you did all that, then they chose to do what was right. So she didn't do anything to their minds at all, okay? And she's claiming that, well, no, they all freely chose to put down their weapons, or at the very least, everyone except for that one guy voluntarily chose to give up their weapons. And then she gives the statement of leftist propaganda right there in the next panel, saying, this is what she says: I've been in enough heads to know that people aren't truly evil. They're simply protective, misinformed, and scared. Whoever is trying to breed hate, that's how we stand against them. So what's she saying? She's saying that people are basically good. That's what she's saying. She's saying people are basically good, which is, again, that's a leftist idea right there. That is pure leftist ideology right there. And who is it that's trying to control their minds? Who is it in this story that is the one that is making them do these things, which they supposedly know better and they shouldn't be doing? Well, that's their government, and that's their superiors. Again, that's the leftist idea that it's the society and the bad institutions in society that's making them do hateful things, right? It's not within these people, because people are essentially good. So this entire page, not just this panel, but this entire page is just pure leftist propaganda. And you may be thinking that I'm overstating my case here and that I'm reading a little too much into this, but no, these panels show differently, because if you look at it and you see what happens after Jean has mentally controlled all of these people, well, what happens? Everybody except for one guy throws down his weapon. Everybody except for one guy. Now, this is a way in a story of showing that what she's saying is absolutely true. Because I've read X-Men for a long time. I've read Marvel for a long time. What should have happened and what used to happen was they would do something like this if it would come down to it, and it would cause confusion at the very least, and there would be some guys trying to stop other guys, and it would give them enough confusion to get away. But not almost 100% of the people doing exactly what she says. Because with almost 100% of these people doing this and peace breaking out, what she says in the next couple of panels is proven to be exactly the case by those actions in the story. The fact that she's saying that, no, people are basically good, all I had to do was go in there and alter their minds a little bit, and then they chose to do what was right, and that's the way things work. And the page before that shows that, yes, that's the way things work. All but one guy did it. So that's not character development. That's proving a point with your story. That's hammering home a point with the narrative. That is the propaganda in the story. And The really scary thing about this, because there is a scary part of this, is that in the annual, I think it was the first page of the annual, Jean says to herself that she's been brought back to life again. But she doesn't accept the world that she lives in, and she is going to change it. And how do we see, both in the pages of the annual and in the very next X-Men, that she changes the world? Well, she changes it by mentally controlling people so that they will do what she says. By going into their minds, by violating their minds and shaming them into doing what she claims is the right thing to do. That's the way that she changes the world in these pages. That's her go-to move. And this being propaganda, this is what the people who are writing this story actually think. Not only do they think that, people are essentially good, we can argue that point, and that, it's the bad institutions that are causing all these problems with the people. Not only do they think that, but they think that the way that you change that, the way that you change the world is not just to get rid of these bad institutions, like they do here, but they also get rid of these people's attachment to their country and to their patriotism, and they do that by mentally controlling them. That's how they do that. And they see it as perfectly fine. They see it as, well, if that's what we got to do, that's what we got to do. And again, I'm looking, I think it's ages 12 and up this book is for. So guess who they're trying to mentally control? Do you think that this is anything else than propaganda? And the way that this story ends just caps it off, because here's something that the writers don't see. I don't think that they do see. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. Because one of those institutions which the left has to destroy in order to bring about this utopia where everybody throws down their guns and there's all peace because everybody's naturally good. One of those institutions you got to get rid of is the idea of a hero. Oh, do they hate that idea? Go through leftist literature. They hate the idea of a hero. But you know what? We got comic books here. And these people are trying to destroy the idea of a hero. This is why Marvel is a steaming pile of horse manure right now. This is why it is the way that it is. Because they're trying to get rid of the idea, the institution of what a hero actually is. And what are they substituting it with? They're substituting with pretty pictures of very fit individuals spouting off propaganda. Gee, we haven't seen that anywhere in the last 100 years, have we? I think a couple of guys with mustaches tried to implement that in a couple of different systems in Europe. How well did that turn out for them? Because they were putting out propaganda. That's what this is. And that's why we need to get politics out of these pages of these comic books. Go back to the 1990s Captain America, where he's just fighting random bad guys. It's just an adventure story. It should just be adventure stories. Again, I'm not opposed to putting in some philosophy or some other ideas into your comics if it has something to do with character development. If it has something to do with the mental state of your character and it's what they think. But again, what Jean is saying here is not just what she thinks. It's being proven by the fact that as soon as she does what she says, everything works out perfectly. So yeah, they're trying to destroy the idea of hero. How is this shown out in the book? I didn't get to that point. How is this shown in the book? Well, how does Cassandra Nova, at the first of the X-Men number 5, how does she start this entire problem to begin with? Well, she enters into the mind of the president of Poland and she changes things. And that's how she very simply starts all of this conflict. And how does Jean Grey deal with the problem and fix it? Does she go and find the people whose minds have been mentally altered and change them back? Does she go and fix the problem or deal with the problem in a different way. No, how she deals with the problem is to go into the minds of other people and change them. Which is the exact same thing that Cassandra Nova did at the first. So your so-called heroes are acting the exact same way as the villain in this book. The exact same way. If that doesn't destroy an idea of what a hero is, I don't know what does. Because there's absolutely no difference in the actions of the hero and the villain. There's just different perspectives, as Jean is talking about in that panel where she said she did nothing wrong. She just needs to change their perspective. So yeah, there is no hero, there is no villain, there's just perspectives. Again, this book is a steaming pile. I suggest you avoid it. Anyway, that's my rant for today. Hopefully you got something useful out of it. If you did, hit like, hit subscribe, share the link with someone else. That's why I'm here, to share ideas. Thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you later. Bye.